We left most of our luggage in the hotel and we set off for La Paz. After travelling down the side of Lake Titicaca, which was our destination, we reached the border town of Yungo between Peru and Bolivia. Here our driver said goodbye. He wished us good luck and sent us walking with our luggage towards the border crossing. As we walked, we noticed a man with a hand cart coming to meet us. He transferred our luggage onto his little tiny cart, and this was when we met our Bolivian tourist guide, who escorted us into the frontier checkpoint to complete the paperwork before we were allowed to enter Bolivia. Eventually, we climbed into our bone shaker minibus and drove on very rough roads to the beautiful town of Copacabana. Not the one in Rio, but equally as beautiful on the shores of the southern part of the beautiful Lake Titicaca. Copacabana is one of the most religious places in Bolivia and has an amazing cathedral dedicated to the Virgin Mary. This place is important to all Bolivians. Any major purchases made in Bolivia should be taken here to be blessed by the priests. Today was no exception, as we saw a new car adorned with flowers that had just been blessed. Imagine getting there with your new washing machine, but it has to be done. Leaving Copacabana, we headed to the short crossing at the bottom of the lake. At the Tacamala Straits, the water is so clear, at over 3,000 metres high. We boarded our vessel, which barely had a floor, and left a lot to be desired. We shared the experience with the recently blessed car, so obviously we felt very safe. Once back on dry land, we took the main road to La Paz, which was definitely not motorway standard. After a few hours on our bone-shaking journey, we arrived above the capital and looked down at the gridlocked roads beneath us. The driver took us off-road to try to beat the traffic and get us to our hotel that was right in the centre. The hotel was much better inside than out, and that evening we enjoyed a cultural show while we ate a lovely dinner. Our next guide for the city of La Paz contacted us and asked if we could start earlier than planned the next day, as there were protests planned against the re-election of the corrupt president and the police would be barricading the city centre. Leaving the hotel at 6:30, we were able to see the main square before it was fully closed off. Our walk continued up and down the streets of this extremely hilly city before the tour became too difficult. Taking to the skies, we viewed the city on the amazing overhead cable cars. These were recently built by the Germans. These routes covered the whole city in a crisscross of overhead cables, which are like an underground network in the sky. Back on the ground, we visited the Witches' Market, where pictorial dishes can be purchased to ward off any nasty situation. Finally, we came across a peaceful protest consisting of women for peace and also doctors and nurses. All the protest movements had their own allotted times, and our guide was going to be in a protest with her fellow tourism guides in the afternoon. This was starting from our hotel. They were extremely worried about their industry because the miners had killed a visitor 2 days previously for taking a photograph of them protesting. That evening, we managed to cross the city to eat at an amazing restaurant called Gusto. We enjoyed the 16-course tasting menu with wine, and afterwards were invited into the kitchen to meet the chefs and shown the experimental labs where their dishes are developed. The next morning had another early start for a flight to Uyuni and our 3-day visit to the salt flats and the desert. Arriving there, our new guide, who was excellent, gave us a short tour of the town and the costume museum. She explained our itinerary for the next 3 days as we headed out to the train cemetery. The trains were built by the British and used to transport salt from the salt flats to the Bolivian coast between Chile and Peru. However, Chile wanted the whole coast, and there were several wars in the late 1800s and early 1900s. These wars eventually resulted in Bolivia losing control over its coastal area and being landlocked. Salt could no longer be exported to the outside world via its own ports. The trains were left to rot, and the graveyard is all that remains of that past. The area around this eerie place was flat for miles, and in the distance were the salt flats we were to explore. Over 700 miles of salt flat with an island or two in the middle. These flats had been used by the Dakar Rally for 2 years, but were abandoned later as many of the drivers got lost in the vast space, with no roads to navigate along, just very distant mountain peaks surrounding this enormous flat salt lake. Of course, this was before sat-navs. We left the main Dakar control centre and travelled a further 40 miles to the middle of nowhere, where our driver set up a splendid lunch of salmon, teeth-bone steaks and lots of other things, and especially wine. With the help of our guide, we took some perspective photographs. It's amazing the ideas that you can play around with in this unique place. We continued to an island covered in tall cactus plants, most of which were over 100 years old. As the sun was starting to descend in the sky, we headed home. Before it got dark, we arrived at a spot for some amazing sunset photos. After we headed for some twinkling lights in the far distance, we discovered that that was to be our hotel for the night. This amazing hotel was built entirely from salt blocks, and everything inside that could be built from salt was. Everything, including our table, chairs, bed base, and other things. The floor was made from salt crystals, which proved to be a little sharp on the bare feet when going to the bathroom in the middle of the night. This was to be our last night of luxury before spending 2 days in the vast Bolivian desert. Yet again, we set off early, and after stopping at a small town to have some lunch, we headed into an area known for its rock structures and beautiful multicoloured mountain backdrops which surround this huge area of sand. We saw a number of 4-wheel drive vehicles at a great distance apart, all heading in the same direction, to the same hotel, many miles away. All were using the driver's preferred route. On many occasions we couldn't see another car. We stopped to see lagoons with flamingos and other wildlife. Eventually, we came upon a group of European cyclists who had run out of water, and they had food but no water to cook it with. We happily gave them ours, as we had a filter for making clean drinking water, and we knew we were getting close to our destination to replenish our stocks. The hotel, the only one for hundreds of miles, was something else. We were given the best room in the place. The sheets were clean, but the blankets were a little holey to say the least. We had hot water from the solar panel on the roof of our room, but only in the evening. In the morning, it would be cold. We could only charge our phones between 6 p.m. and 10, as the hotel's solar batteries were needed to keep the public spaces lit during the night. During our dinner, we saw on the TV news there were fires, riots, and major problems in La Paz. It was very clear our guide and driver were extremely concerned. The president had fled the country, and his violent supporters from the countryside had come into the city. They were burning the tourist buses and had occupied the airport. It was clear that we would not be able to return to our hotel in central La Paz the next day. The following morning we continued our shortened journey to ensure we got back to Uyuni in time for our flight out. We passed the hot springs and other geographical features. Arriving at the airport about 8 p.m, it was chaos, and we found it was closed. No flights from Uyuni to La Paz, and if we could get back to La Paz, there were no coaches there to take us to Puno. Our guide was amazing, and after many frantic phone calls, eventually our Latin and English agents got us out of Bolivia over a 24-hour period with no sleep and 3 flights: Uyuni to Santa Cruz, overnight to Lima, and finally a flight to Puno. On arrival back at the hotel in the evening, we recounted our experience of escaping the Bolivian coup. The receptionist felt so sorry for us, she upgraded our room, which was really lovely. We were very thankful and were able to continue our holiday on the overnight Belmont train to Cusco.